The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, 10 Tips to Negotiate Your Salary Like a Pro, offered by the Oregon State University Alumni Association in partnership with Professional and Continuing Education Units. I'm Greg Aronoff, the Marketing and Communications Manager here with PACE, and I am joined by Yuliya Dennis from the Alumni Association. And welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Greg.
So before we get started, I'm going to share our agenda for the day. I work for Professional and Continuing Ed, which is the non-credit arm of the university. We partner with colleges across campus to offer open enrollment classes to the public on subjects ranging from workforce training to gardening to beer making. And we're always excited to continue our partnership with Yuliya Dennis from the Alumni Association. And I'm sure some of you have joined us for our other webinars on the career series. So we're excited to have Yuliya here to talk about negotiating your salary like a pro.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's always really great to be here with you and share these career success tips with everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Yuliya Dennis and I'm the Director for Alumni Career Services at the OSU Alumni Association, and I oversee our career programs, and I'm really passionate about this work. I get really excited, especially when I get to share things like salary negotiation tips with people. It really does make a big impact in people's lives, and I'm really thankful to be able to do this kind of work. And I'm really thrilled to just continue to have these career webinar series with PACE, and I'm grateful for their partnership.
Okay, great. So during the webinar, please feel free to ask questions via the chat box, and questions will be addressed throughout the webinar. And after everything is over, we'll send you the email with a link to the video so you can watch it as you have time.
Thank you. So I'm going to share a little bit about our OSU Alumni career programs, and then we're going to do a quick poll as well. So we have a couple poll questions that we're going to be sharing with you. So first, about alumni career programs. So we're really glad to be able to offer this wonderful service to our alumni and our alumni community. We do all kinds of programs and services. So for example, we do free resume reviews. So send me your resume if you would like to have your resume reviewed by our office. We also do events like this one. We also offer one-on-one consultations as well. Again, you can reach out to me for those things. We offer various ways for you to volunteer and get involved to continue to build your network. So it's a fantastic way for you to get your own career going or to help the career of other people. So reach out to me anytime if you'd like to talk or share or get to know more about our career programs. And then we'll go ahead and do our first question. And we'll have Greg lead the way for that.
Okay, so how did you hear about this webinar? If you could select one of the following: the OSU Alumni Association email, a LinkedIn post from us, from OSU PACE, a friend or colleague, or other. And we'll let that go for just a little bit longer. Looks like most of you have voted already.
And I always love asking this kind of a question because we want to spread the word, and I love knowing how people hear about things.
Okay, looks like the results are in. So 78% from OSU Alumni Association email.
Great. Those come from me. Great.
And 11% from PACE, and then 6% from a friend, and 6% from other.
Great. Well, thank you for PACE as well, sending that information out. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Great. Thank you. Well, and I'm really grateful for all of you who are here. And all right, so we'll continue on. So about this webinar, by the end, you'll know how to negotiate your salary and other perks. We'll identify a couple key principles, and then we'll talk about how to ask and get what you want. And these are things that are really important, and I'm eager to get started on this topic. So it's really important that you always negotiate. And if there's anything that I want you to take away from this webinar, is that if the question is, should I be negotiating? The answer is always yes. And fear can get in the way of bringing up topics like salary. But what I want you to do is never say no to yourself. So you have the right to ask for a higher salary. You should always negotiate. And plenty of times in life, the answer will be no from someone for something that you ask for. But what I don't want you to do is have that no come from you. And so there's a nice quote that I like to share with people is, if you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. If you don't ask, the answer will always be no. And if you don't step forward, you'll always be in the same place. So never say yes right away. Always negotiate once you've had an offer.
So part of the webinar sign up, we asked you what your one question would be. So related to this, one of the questions was, how can we be firm and stand up for ourselves when the response from HR is simply no, or that's not in the budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the no may come, especially for organizations that are like nonprofits or they are pretty low budget. Like I got to know a startup that always paid everybody's the same, no matter if you were the CEO, if you were the assistant, didn't matter. They always had the same salary for everybody. And so the answer may still be no. That doesn't mean that you should be the one to just automatically assume that you should negotiate. And in those cases, so let's say you do follow the principles that I outlined today, and they're still saying, no, we can't do this, then it's really going to be up to you for you to determine whether you walk away from this or whether you do say yes. And so we're going to go through some additional information throughout the webinar that will outline some things you can do to research to figure out if the offer is going to be a sustainable one for you. But it may be that they can't give you what you want, and you do have to walk away. So that's always on the table for you as well. Great question. So a few things that I wanted to share is that so one of the things I'm most passionate about is encouraging people who have never thought about negotiating to negotiate. So only 7% of women negotiate their first salary compared to 57% of men. And the average increase for salary increases, if you do negotiate, is 7%. And a few people that I've helped, including we'll hear a case today, some people have been able to negotiate up to 15% or higher for their initial salary offer. And so another thing to note is that, so if let's say you take two people, one negotiates their first salary, the other one does not. And if you have the same raises, the same promotions throughout your career, the person who didn't negotiate their first salary offer, they have to work an additional 8 full working years to make up the difference. So that's huge. 8 full working years. And then this nice graph describes some other things, and so you can read through and see the importance of this. But my takeaway for you is just always negotiate. It's really important. And like I said, the average salary increase is 7%, so it's always worth asking for more. And then we're actually going to do another poll question here. So now that you know why it's important, we want to know a little bit about how much you know about salary negotiation.
Have you negotiated salary in your past?
Yep, have you negotiated your salary in the past? So we'll go ahead and have you answer. So have you negotiated your salary in the past?
We'll give this just a little bit more, but it looks like it's trending yes. So right now it's about 60% yes, 65% yes, 35% no.
Great. Well, I'm really proud of everyone. Good job. And so the 30 some will make sure that you negotiate your next one for sure. Yeah, great. Thank you everybody for answering that. So I wanted to share a story. So I spoke with one of our alumni, Carolyn, about her salary negotiation. So we actually have her on the call. And I just wanted her to share her story, describe her process, what she did, etc. So we'll go ahead and have Carolyn share.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the webinar today. I just wrapped up at school about 6 months ago, and I was really thankful to have the access to resources like the Alumni Association when I was looking for work. So I am about to start a job as an engineer, and so I know how to engineer, but I don't know what the market looks like. I don't always know what the steps are forward in terms of corresponding with people in HR and people they're meeting me. So being able to talk to folks like Yuliya has been a really big help. I tend to be a harmonizer. I don't like to ask questions, so it felt really uncomfortable to ask for more than I was offered. But luckily I was able to get a hold of Yuliya, and I kind of outlined, like, I'm really excited about the company. It seems really fair. Like, I don't think I'm going to ask. And she said, no, you need to ask. And so she worked with me to pick kind of an outline that I could either use to call or to send as an email. And I chose to email just because that felt more comfortable to me. But not only did the folks who were hiring me take into consideration my request, when they sent back a revised offer, they also commented that because I had asked, they were thinking about the salaries they tend to offer junior level engineers and if they're competitive with other companies on the market. So it not only helped me, but it's likely going to help other people in the future.
And what was the response to your request? What kind of how did they respond to your own salary request?
So they offered an increased salary, and I didn't get quite what I was asking for, but I think the bump, they gave me at least a 10% bump and acknowledged that they were going to re-review my work 6 months into my position, which is sooner than annual reviews usually take. So I will get another chance to potentially get bumped again.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And I think that you pretty much followed almost all the principles that we outlined in this webinar. So I'm really glad that you're sharing your story, and I'm really proud that you were able to keep asking, even though you yourself wanted to not negotiate or ask for more.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the help. Again, we have amazing resources as OSU graduates, and it takes either only a phone call or an email to get a lot of help with something that you're not familiar with at all.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Really appreciate your time and call.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So that was a great example of an alum who went ahead and negotiated their salary after talking to me. And so everything that I shared with Carolyn, you will get to know all of that throughout this webinar. So the first question is, okay, so I want to negotiate, but when do I do it? So the best time to negotiate is when you do have an offer. So I would say don't ever negotiate or start talking salary until there's an offer on the table. So when they say, yes, we want you, that's when you start the conversation. Sometimes they will press you to give your offer, your salary needs, etc. before. As much as possible, if you can avoid talking about it, that's going to be the best opportunity for you to get the highest offer. Now, that's not always possible, but if you can. So some ways to avoid making that or having that conversation before an official job offer is to say something like, I'm very interested in this position. Thank you for asking me. I need to know more about the role before I can give you a salary requirement, etc. And if they do keep pressing you and they do want you to give them an expectation of salary before there's an official offer, then you can go ahead and follow the tips I give you about how to figure out that number that you're going to provide them in the range. But if you can, try to not start the salary negotiation until there's an official job offer on the table. There are other times, though, that you can negotiate. So some other times include a change in the position scope. So for example, you might be supervising someone, or you might have a change in your position description, or you have an annual review. And I did work with someone recently, an alumna, who was she was being tasked with training her supervisor and a bunch of other things. And so my recommendation for people is to go ahead and get that in writing. So have your position description be altered so that you have the new responsibilities added in there, and then talk about what are the possibilities for a raise. And so for raises mid-year, you can also do something similar, like you can ask for like a 10% increase, or you can use the other resource that I'll share later to figure out, okay, where would you ideally need to be or want to be with these new responsibilities, or do you negotiate a title change, etc. But so change in scope and then annual review are some of the times to negotiate your salary.
So one of the questions we have is, what's the most natural way to bring up getting a raise when changing positions internally?
Yeah, so if you're changing position internally, then we're going to assume a couple things. So one is that you do have a new position description, whether it be already official or you're just reworking that, and so that's the opportunity to get a raise. Ideally, you would want to start talking about it before you sign off and say, okay, yes, I take on this role. Because essentially what you're trying to do at all cases with negotiation is before you say yes to something firmly, you negotiate what they're going to give you for doing that work. So if you're going to be changing positions within your company, then you say, okay, great, I'm really excited to, let's say you're becoming a manager, I'm really excited to do this. I'd like to ask for a 15% raise to compensate for the extra work that I'm going to be doing. I'm really excited to review my position description. Can we talk about a 15% raise, something like that? But yeah, you definitely want to bring it up when you're changing scope or positions. Great question. So another thing to keep in mind when negotiating your salary, or really when you're negotiating anything, is do have the other party make that initial offer. So ideally, they provide you the initial salary number, and then you can, like I said earlier, you can deflect the salary questions by saying that you need to know more about the position, or there's no offer yet, and so you're not ready to negotiate something. What this allows is for you to get a sense of what is their very best offer. When someone makes you an offer, that means they want you. They have gone through a lot of time, a lot of energy to try to get someone that they feel comfortable and confident about having in that position. That means that as far as power dynamics go, you're in the power seat because they want you, they want to offer you something that will make you say yes. And so having them make the offer means that you're not going to undersell yourself and provide a number that is lower potentially than what they're being willing to offer you.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Related, is it fair to ask my boss to share the compensation at my current level to see if I'm being paid fairly?
So I'm going to assume that this person's asking about the compensation for other people in their company, or yeah, I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more from the person. Maybe you can type in more details about what you're asking for. But in general, and so I'll give you time to write that. So in general, it shouldn't be. In general, I would say be confident to ask for what you want, regardless of what other people around you are making. So other people's salaries should not be something that holds you back. So you're welcome to talk to other people about salaries. So for you, if you're asking for an increase in your own position, then I'd recommend using things like what I'm going to share, like Glassdoor.com or other public avenues for referencing your salary or salary potentials for different positions. And so I would say a lot of people cite, okay, well, this is how much we pay other people, and so we're going to keep you at this salary as well. And so I would say that generally speaking, that will probably be used to pay you less. And so using something like Glassdoor.com or other resources will help you get paid more than what they're traditionally going to be willing to offer you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I took it as you should empower yourself instead of putting the onus on someone else, that you should do your own research and then you can have that in your back pocket.
Exactly. Yep. Perfect. Yep. That's exactly it. Any other questions based on that? Okay, great. Yeah, that's a great question. So this actually leads very well to this next section. So Glassdoor.com is a really fantastic tool to do your research. And so like when I helped Carolyn, we actually, during our call, we went on Glassdoor. We figured out that the offer that she was made was actually pretty consistent already with the average and the median pay that is offered for that position, but she was still able to negotiate above that, which is really excellent. So typically, the other things you can do is you can talk to recruiters, you can talk to other people about the same type of position. For me, I like using online tools like Glassdoor.com because then you have, especially if you can do like a regional search, then you're getting a sense of the broader picture of what the whole scope of the position might entail and the kinds of pay that people are receiving. If you're doing a little bit of research where you're talking to just one or two people, then your sample might be skewed towards a higher or lower pay. And because I'm an advocate for not underselling yourself, I would advocate for using something like Glassdoor before using just like a personal reference for your pay. And then yeah, so when you make that the counter offer, the best thing I think to do is to take that median pay that you find online, and then you ask for that and 20% above that. And that can get you in that like 7-10% increase if they are willing to say yes to your counteroffer. Yes, questions?
What about if it's not a new position and it's not an annual review? How do you go about asking for a raise in your current position?
Yeah, so you can definitely ask for a raise in your current position. So you should be able to demonstrate exactly how you're going above and beyond what is asked of you, or how you're not being paid fairly. So like in a previous position, I started a negotiation process for getting increase based on me feeling like the pay I had received while I did negotiate is still not compensating me for the work that I'm doing. And so the way to go about that is you create a one-sheet description. You identify exactly what you want. So you give the salary range or the percentage increase that you want. You identify the achievements that you've done that demonstrate your competency. So you always want to focus on the things you're doing very well, you're excelling in, things that are your accomplishments when you're doing this. And then you bring that up. They can always say no, but it's a good starting point for you. And then let's say they say no, you can say, can we re-review at our annual review? I'd like to re-review my salary then. And that gives you a nice buffer for the future to then again start that negotiating process. And definitely in some cases they will be able to make that increase for you. Great question. So there's other things you can do to figure out, especially if it's a new position or you're moving geographically, okay, what kind of expectation can I have for myself? So you can look at your living and other expenses, and I recommend that you become familiar with your minimum salary needs. So this is a nice graph of can you afford a home in your city? So this is salary based on median priced homes within an area. And so this gives you a sense that not all salaries are going to get you an even or an equal amount of resources within a city. Now, when you actually negotiate, you should never bring up personal reasons for why you should negotiate a higher salary. So things like family needs, kids, health reasons, living expenses, etc. Those are never good reasons for an employer to say yes to you. But this is for you to educate yourself to know, okay, here's so like obviously in a place like New York and Boston, like you're going to need a much higher salary than like, let's say a place like Cleveland, Ohio, which has a much lower cost of living. And so this is just for you to become familiar with your own needs. But then when you actually do the negotiation, it's based on your experience, your expertise, your knowledge, the median pay for your particular position type within your geographical area. So those are the things that you're using to justify your reasoning. But this is just for you to become educated for your own self so that you know what your ideal minimum salary is. And that also helps you to know your walkaway point. So I would encourage you to have in your mind a certain salary range that you're like, this is not going to be worth it for me. So one example, I was meeting with a CEO of a startup, and they had a salary model where everyone, including them, made $35,000 flat, no matter what their position was. And so their organization was all about their mission, their values, etc. CEO, president, assistant, whoever, they all made the same exact salary. So in some cases, like people do make decisions to stick to what would be considered a lower pay based on their values. And so that's something for you to consider as well, as like what do you stand for, what matters to you. But I do recommend having a minimum in mind.
So you touched a little bit about this. How do you ask for what you deserve without coming across as ungrateful or presumptuous?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll share more about templates and things that you can use. And this is something that Carol and I talked a lot about because she was very grateful for the offer. And so for me, that relationship building component is so important. So this is the start of a relationship, especially if you do decide to say yes to their final offer. So you always want to come across as grateful. That being said, there's like a balance. So you come across as grateful and kind and appreciative, but also kind of a bit aloof. So again, keep in mind that when you're getting that first offer is when you have the most power to get the highest salary possible. Because once you're in the position, yes, they may say yes to you, but they're not going to give you as high of a salary increase as they would when they really want you and they want you to do the work that they're going to be hiring you for. So being grateful and saying, thank you, I appreciate the information, I appreciate the offer, but then saying, I need to think about this, it's an important decision, I want a few days to think it over, here's what I'd like, etc. And I'll give you actually, in a few minutes, I'll give you a template for how to ask that's done in a very gracious way. And then afterwards, being very appreciative and sharing your enthusiasm, but sharing your enthusiasm in a way that doesn't let them know for sure that you're going to say yes. So you want them to wonder, So in Carolyn's case, she really did. Her response, which she actually used the same template that I'm going to share with you, made them wonder if she would say yes, and they really wanted her. So then they were willing to up the offer based on that. We'll talk a little bit more about how to do the negotiation. So as I mentioned before, it's not about anything personal. So nothing about childcare or anything about your personal expenses or parental care, et cetera, or anything else that you have going on in your life. This is really about your professional experience. So you should be able to articulate a couple key things that you're going to do really well for them. So you've already talked about in your interview, there's a reason why they make you the offer. There's a reason why they want you. And so you're just going to focus on that above all else. So here's the expertise I'm bringing. Here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm really excited to be doing these things for you, but don't tie in anything personal. And I've actually made this mistake before. So in one of my negotiations, I talked about healthcare expenses as like, well, I'm not going to be taking your insurance because I already have insurance, but they flat out said, well, that doesn't matter to us because you might take our insurance later on, and it's not going to. We can't use that as a means to give you a higher salary. And now that I think about it, I totally agree with that response. So keep it on your professional experience and expertise when you're negotiating. All right. Any questions up to this point?
Okay, it's kind of a longer one. I'm just going to read it.
Great.
If the company has a smaller staff, company size is less than 50 or so, how can I negotiate the salary after my annual review? I did the research via Glassdoor, but my company uses the company sizes to lower the minimum number.
Yeah, sometimes that's definitely the case. So ideally, you would negotiate your salary before the annual review. And so you can definitely bring it up. So if you're negotiating your salary after the annual review, there should be good reason. So just actually a couple weeks ago, I grabbed coffee with someone, and she was in a position where she was asking for an increase after her annual review. They actually just completed it. But what she really needed was to redo her position description. So her position description was outdated. It did not include some of the things that she's been working on. And so she then followed up and said, okay, so the first starting point is I would like to have my position description reviewed. I'd like to make sure that that's updated. And then you would tie that in with, I would also like to ask for an increase. I would still use research on Glassdoor. I would still ask for that median to 20% range. When it comes to smaller companies, sometimes the budgets, they really are tight. And it really is a potentially smaller pay than what would be the average. And so it's up to you then to determine whether you want to stay in that role given that circumstance. But you should still ask, and ideally, if you're not changing a lot of your scope of the work, but you're doing your work very well and you'd like to ask for an increase, I encourage all of you to start those conversations before the actual annual review process starts. So you would initiate the conversation, talk about, just say, I'd like to talk to you about my position, I'd like to talk about goals, my role, etc. Have a conversation, have that one sheet ready, give the range, and then initiate that. And then the annual review process can take part, and then you can modify your salary or your position or your position title based on the discussion that you have with your supervisor and manager. All right, so you've seen the slide now. So the ask. This is where, like, I have seen people literally follow this to a T and get like up to 15% based on this very simple format. So always want to express a thank you. Always want to say that you are enthusiastic about the position, but that you do want to ask more questions about your salary. And ideally, when you do get the offer, you say, I'd like to think it over for a few days. And then you just make them wait and sit there. Even if you already have this response, don't give it to them right away. Let them wait a day or two, again, to show that you are serious about considering this and this is very important to you. So you can actually say, I appreciate the offer at blank, whatever is their offer, but I was expecting to be in the blank range. And you can give a range. So you can say, let's say they offered you 40, and you looked on Glassdoor and the average is actually 45,000. So you could say, I was expecting to be in the range of 45,000 to 50 based on my experience driving performance. And then you can list a couple things. I know I will bring blank and blank to the company. And then can we look at a salary of, and I recommend doing something like, for example, if you are aiming for 45, you can say something like, can we look at a salary of 45,500 for this position? So a more specific number just shows more research to the company. So any questions based on the template there?
Not on the template, but related questions. So this is one of the write-in ones. When I've tried to negotiate salary when offered a position, the response is, that is what we have to offer, take it or leave it. I don't see how there is any space to respond. I've tried speaking of my experience and education and received the same response.
Okay. Yeah, so they will sometimes say no, and whenever we negotiate for something, for anything, we should be prepared that the answer might be no, and be able to know if the answer is no, are we willing to accept the offer that they're making? So I would say that always negotiate, and then you can also press them and see if there's any opportunities for additional things. So for example, in this case, if the answer is no, we can't, this is what we offer, say, could we do a 90 or 60-day review? Or could we do a 6-month review and then readjust my salary based on my performance, something like that. That way you're at least buying yourself the opportunity to get a higher salary in the future. But in some cases, like I know for many classified positions that are hourly, the pay that they offer is typically really set based on like a union contract, and there's not much wiggle room in that. And so there are going to be times or positions where that's not possible. But the response is still always negotiate, always ask. And then if they say no, be prepared to know if you would accept the position or not with the no in mind.
So a follow-up, if they do have the cap, how do you negotiate other things while negotiating salary? So like a flex schedule or vacation, etc.
Yeah, so that actually leads us perfectly into the next slide. So there's all kinds of ways that you can negotiate and negotiate things afterwards that could potentially significantly bump your like what they're initially offering you. And so for me, how I recommend doing it is you first get the base salary negotiated first. So you don't even talk about the other perks until you get to the salary. The reason for that is that these other perks, they fluctuate. They might be a one-time thing. They're not a permanent thing that's part of your every day or every monthly income that you're getting. So negotiate that first. But once you negotiate that, and let's say their answer is yes, we'll pay you this much, and then you're like, okay, great, that's a good offer. or they say, no, this is an offer, we can't give you more. So regardless of which way they go, that's when you say, okay, I'd like to negotiate for other things. So you can negotiate for work from home, for phone payment assistant. You can negotiate for vacation benefits. So one person I worked with, she actually was able to negotiate two things after the salary negotiation. So she did the salary negotiation. She got a higher salary pay, which was great. She renegotiated her position title. And she was able to do that by stating, here's my experience, here's the expertise. I'd like to start with this kind of a title. And they honored that. And the reason she wanted the title change is because it would help her with her next job search. So the title was a lot more in line. It was doing the same work that they were initially offering her to do, but it would allow her to translate that work to her future position a lot better. And then the other thing is, in her company, everybody started off with 2 weeks of vacation time for their first year, and then they get bumped up to 3 weeks of vacation time their second year. And she was able to say, may I have additional vacation time right off the bat? And so they actually gave her 3 weeks off during her first year. So that's amazing. So not only did she get the increase, but she also got a whole week's worth of vacation, which is excellent, and a title that fit her long-term goals. So other things you can negotiate are technologies, conferences. Conferences are big. And so you can get, easily a couple thousand, 5,000, maybe even more based on conference expenditures. And these are things that are going to help you later on in your career too. So this is a big bonus for you. All kinds of professional development. So like for me, I was able to negotiate a certificate and a bunch of other things that were essentially extra to my pay, because otherwise I would have had to pay out of pocket for them. And this way the company paid for them. The other really important one to negotiate is moving expenses. Again, you do this after the initial salary increase. So you never want to start talking about these things before there's a salary increase, because you don't want them to justify paying you lower. But you do want to ask, like, hey, I'm moving across the country. I'd like to have, this is the average it costs to move. Are you able to cover moving expenses? In some cases they can, in some cases they can't, but it's always really good to ask. Any more questions from the group?
Yes. Can you negotiate a government position salary?
Yeah, I would say you can always definitely negotiate a government position salary. So it's reasonable to negotiate. And so with government positions, there's usually a step grade. There's a step grade. And so just like in other negotiations, you can use things like your specialized knowledge, your skill, your education, qualities that you're bringing to them that are going to impact your ability to do the position very well. And so you can negotiate within that. With government positions, their budgets can be pretty unstable, and so sometimes they have funding, sometimes they don't. Like I work with a federal government recruiter quite a bit, and whenever people have questions about federal job searching, I always connect him with them, because it can be a different kind of process to both apply for and negotiate for government type positions. But it's still reasonable to try, and it's still reasonable to use the same methods that we've talked about here to negotiate for government positions as well. Good question. All right, any other questions before we move on to the next section?
This one is a tactical question.
All right, let's hear it.
What do you do when the supervisor for the new position, so you're applying for a new job, what do you do when the supervisor for the new position tells you that they are not the key decision maker and that they will speak with the decision maker and get back to you? After a few days, they tell you that they did not get it approved. What do you do then?
Yep. So that's actually very typical. So most of the time, the manager who's hiring you is not the same person who makes the budget decision. So that's pretty typical. And so what that means is they try to advocate, and they were like, no, we don't have in the budget. So you could do two things. So you could go ahead and ask, is this the final offer? Ask again and expect to potentially hear no. So the persistence could help. And then you move on to negotiating for other benefits. So those are your two options for steps forward. And then finally, let's say you try to negotiate for other benefits, and let's say no. So this is the offer and there's nothing else. So at that point, you would need to be willing to figure out, do you walk away or not? and it would be up to you to determine whether or not the salary is one that you would be fine and happy with. Any other questions?
Do you ask for all the benefits at once, or is it a tiered system, or what's your process for that?
Yeah, I recommend asking for them all at once. And so what I recommend doing is you would negotiate your initial salary first. You could ask again to bump it or not, and then you would do them all at once. And I would actually do this in writing and just one by one by one. And so you can just go through and say, I have a couple additional questions. Am I able to work from home some days? Is there phone payment assistance? I plan to use my phone for work-related expenses. What are the vacation benefits? Is that negotiable? What are the technology needs? I would like to ask for this kind of a computer to get help with being able to do my work very well. So I know a lot of people who've been able to get new computers and iPads and all kinds of things as part of their initial negotiation. Conferences, I'd like to attend this and this conference. Like for me, I negotiated 2 different conferences when I first started because I was like, look, these are the conferences that really are valuable for me. I'd like to attend these. And I got yes on all of them. And then moving expenses. So I'm going to be moving. Here's my extent. And then you just make a bulleted list and then you ask them. And then they'll tell you yes or no, or kind of depending on what the things are. But the great thing is that or like parking, that's another thing I forgot to mention, parking or bus passes. That's a really good one, especially in big cities. Parking can be really expensive. And so if let's say they give you like a $300, $500 parking thing, like that's basically all of these things are an extra in your salary. So like for me, I actually was able to negotiate about a 10% increase on top of the other increase based on these extra benefits. I calculated them out and I said, here's how much it's worth at the end. And it was 10% more than what they even already offered on top of my salary. So definitely these things add up significantly. Cool, I love the questions. Any other questions?
Not yet.
Okay, great. So some of you have already asked about how do you do this in a way that really supports the relationship? And that's what I'm for. I advocate for doing this in a way that you're starting a new position and a new relationship within a company or with the people that you're going to be working with. So you want to do this with as much grace as possible. And so do take time to send out thank yous and appreciate the people. So I would send out cards or emails, and then also take time to celebrate your achievement. So especially if you've never negotiated your salary before, that's a big deal. Like you just did something that takes courage, that takes assertiveness, that takes a certain level of confidence. And so you should celebrate that you did this. And that way you can really benefit from what you did and what you accomplished during this process. And then next, well, any questions as of now? Any other questions?
Well, I thought this one was interesting. This is about Oregon law. So let me read the question.
Sure.
Does the new Oregon law regarding asking salary history affect asking questions regarding the wage range of the position? What if you don't know and they won't tell you?
Yeah, excellent question. So for those of you who don't know, so the new Oregon equal pay law, as of 2017, it prohibits employers from seeking the pay history of employment of applicants and employees. So I think this is a fantastic thing. I think that generally speaking, people use your previous pay history to pay you less, because it's always in the company's best interest to pay as little as possible for having the highest level expertise in work. That's just common sense economics. So I think this law is great. So as of 2019, it's going to be unlawful for employers to discriminate based on the person's employee status or other wages from previous positions, etc., or screen job applicants based on current or their past compensation. So I think this is a really great step forward in our society for having more equal pay, and especially it really impacts women and minority status people. So I think it's a great thing. So And the question is based on really how will this impact. So obviously it significantly impacts because employers are prohibited from seeking the pay history of the applicants. But also, so if the employer is not giving you a range, which that's pretty typical that they're not giving you a range, then you would still use something like Glassdoor to figure that out. And if they're asking for you to provide the range, then you would use Glassdoor to find that average pay and then use that as your starting basis for your pay salary.
Follow-up question. Is there ever a time that you should not negotiate? Should you always ask for more or not?
Great question. Okay, so always negotiate. So there's never a time to not negotiate, because when you don't negotiate, what you're doing is you're the one that says no to your own self. And so when we negotiate, we give the opportunity to say no to the other party. So always allow other people. And I mean, we all live in the world. Like, we know people are going to say no to us often. I mean, we want something doesn't mean we're going to get it. But what I advocate for is that you're not the one deciding that for yourself. Because if you're deciding that for yourself, chances are you're going to say, I don't deserve it, or no, they're not going to do it. You're going to talk yourself out of it. So your default position, I think, should always be, in all circumstances, to go ahead and negotiate. And then if the answer is no, the answer is no. And that's fine. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you still want to do it. All right. So my next slide is, I think, something that really, really motivates me. So for my very first salaried position, I spoke with someone that I considered to be a mentor and someone I really respected who worked in the HR field. And they actually discouraged me from negotiating. They told me, oh, that salary sounds like a good salary. And it was actually a really low salary they were offering me in comparison to what I should have been making. And they discouraged me from negotiating. But I thought about it after I talked to them on the phone. I was like, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And the interesting thing is they gave me, I want to say it was like 8 to 9% increase, because I asked for more. And so it was a good increase that they offered. And I just chose to not listen to that other person. And so what I want you to do is I want you to encourage other people to negotiate. And we all need encouragement to do courageous things. And it does take courage to ask for a higher salary. And so I want you to do it yourself, and then I want you to help other people do the same.
I have a question about, we got a question about not burning bridges.
Yeah.
So how do I thank the employer and politely walk away after the salary negotiation?
Yep, that's great. So definitely, like, I would say I would be pretty upfront with them and say, thank you so much for being willing to do this net negotiation with me. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate being part of this search. I really admire what your company stands for, the values, the mission, etc. Unfortunately, based on the offer, it doesn't meet my salary needs, and I'm not able to accept the offer. So I really kindly want to say that I appreciate everything you've done, but I'm not able to accept the offer as it stands. And so I wish you all the best in the future, and thank you again. And in some cases, honestly, they might be like, oh, like, you're serious about this offer. Maybe, wait, hold on. Don't say no. Like, let me talk to someone. And in some cases, you're going to go, I'm very sorry that we can't meet your need. And then you walk away. But it is okay to say no. I will say, though, that let's say you're applying in the same company. And let's say it's a pretty big company. So, 150, 200, 300 plus employees, and you're doing this multiple times, I would say reconsider a couple things. One is, do you see a future with that company? And two is, maybe your salary expectations are just not congruent with that company. Maybe that they don't match. Or maybe there's something about that, there's something not matching. So I would say be careful about saying no to multiple offers from the same place. But definitely saying no to like one offer from a place is totally acceptable. And they may decide to counter offer based on that, potentially.
I have a question that came in, and it's sort of the little voice of justifying of why we don't ask for anything. So it's, Does asking for more vacation time to a new employer give them an impression of you being lazy or poor work ethics?
No, I don't think so, especially since you're going to be, so when you ask for more vacation time, you're not doing it as a standalone. You're just asking for all these other benefits. And so you say, what's the starting vacation time, etc. So like the person who negotiated an extra week, she is extremely hardworking. I mean, I worked with her for a number of weeks on her job search and on her offer, and they knew this about her, and they gave this to her as a bonus because they weren't able to give her quite as high of a salary as they had wanted to. So it's seen as like a salary benefit, as an enticement. But I would say if you're very upfront about what you're selling and what you're giving to them, then that's definitely not a lazy thing. Plus, we know that vacation time is important. Vacation time is not a sign of laziness. Work-life balance is not a sign of laziness. It's a sign that you have personal relationships, you have personal hobbies, you're a full person, and you have things in your life that you are excited about that are not just work related. So I would not equate those two things as being together. All right, any other questions? Okay, great. So I'm just going to give a brief overview, and we'll do the first 5 and then the next 5 and the next slide. So I think the things I just really want to highlight are that you always, 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 always negotiate. And and it doesn't really ultimately matter what their response is, because you know that you've done the best you can to have the best offer possible, and that's what really matters at the end of the day. So always negotiate. And then we talked a lot about how to identify your needs and how to do your research, etc. And these tips, I have seen them work over and over and over and over again for people and make significant impact in the pay that they receive. So I encourage you to really apply these things that we've talked about. And then, of course, something else to consider is that I think a lot of you have really gotten this point too, with that it's a relationship. And so being enthusiastic, being positive about the offer while keeping a distance and asking for a day or two to consider and asking for additional benefits, etc. So still being that person who asks, but doing it in a way that really honors that relationship, by being gracious, by being thankful, it's gonna make a difference for you. And then always, of course, I would want you to encourage others to do the same, because we all need encouragement. I think that no matter what your level is, I think that it's important to have people in our life who really believe in us. And I firmly believe in your ability to negotiate your own salary.
We have a question that just came in.
Yeah.
In a salaried position, how do you address expected work hours?
Great. Yep. So those kind of cultural questions are really important. So for me, before I even consider saying yes to something, I want to know more about this expected work hours. And for cultural questions, what I found the best thing to do is to figure out a way to talk to people about these kinds of things who are not directly related to the hiring committee or the hiring manager. So, because when it comes to work culture, it's one thing for people to say something, but practice looks different. So what I've done in the past and what I recommend you doing is, if you can find, I mean, ideally you have at least one person in an ideal job search. You've developed even a temporary, short, quick relationship with at least one person that you can ask a couple of questions about, and just say, hey, I'd like to ask a few questions about your company. So what's the work like? Like what's kind of a schedule like? What's kind of typical expectations, etc. And that's when you really get the real sense, because some people will say, oh, it's 40 hours a week, etc. But I worked in a place once where, like, if you were out around 5, you would get looked at by everyone as you're walking out, and people are like judging you. And I'm like, well, you're saying this, but the practice is you're feeling guilty if you're not staying until 6, 7, or later. And so that's where, if you talk to people and get a sense, then you can know what the expected hours are. Or you can also figure out just based on, just your knowledge of the company, kind of what the company culture is. All right, and we're about to wrap up here. We have just a few minutes left. Great questions, great topics, everybody. So next steps, so the first one is, do negotiate your salary. Join our LinkedIn group. So we have a Beaver Careers LinkedIn group that you can join if you're an OSU alum or you're a student or your faculty and staff. And then message me or email me one takeaway from the webinar, and you can be entered to win a free consultation with me. And then we do have another webinar coming up January 31st. It's going to be for hiring managers or people who are on hiring committees and how to diversify your workforce. So we're going to learn from our Alumni Career Ambassador, Kyle Waracki, about how to recruit and retain a more diverse pool and team. And then do reach out to me for follow-up. So I'm very passionate about this topic. I definitely want to help you be successful, meet your career goals, negotiate your salary, etc. So reach out to me and I'd be glad to help you through whatever goals you have.
And it looks like we have some final questions, and we can address those in the follow-up email.
Perfect. That's excellent.
All right. So thank you so much, Yuliya. That was great. I did want to quickly provide some information to our audience. I talked a little bit about professional and continuing ed at OSU, and the reason we like to partner with the Alumni Association and hear from our alumni is because we're often able to connect with the very widespread OSU network throughout not only the state of Oregon, but the US and beyond, and we can help provide educational opportunities for personal enrichment and professional development. Each program we offer is designed for working professionals with convenient online classes and year-round start dates. We also offer customizable team training. And again, I want to thank Yuliya, and we really appreciate you having here. And this was great. You delivered a ton of great content. And that'll wrap it up. So thank you so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's been amazing. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and I really appreciate all your help navigating this. Great.
Of course. Thank you.